A defining moment in our relationship. I was sitting at the kitchen table when my wife came home from the grocery store. She saw the notepad and pen in my hand on the table in front of me and asked, "What are you doing?" "I decided to take your challenge." I don't remember any challenge. Remember last week when we were reading the stories on that website? I commented on how bad some of them were and said that even I could do better. You said I couldn't. You said I didn't have a single creative bone in my body. I guess I said that, but my comment was based on what I know about your grades when we were in school. You always got B's and C's for your work in classes that required written reports, and you got a C for the work you had to do on business research and report writing. Well, I think I can do better than that. Whatever you say. Come on, you can help me get the groceries in. I helped her get the bags in, helped her put some things away, and sat down at the table to write. As she was making dinner, she asked, "What's this about?" "I won't tell you. I'll let you read it when I'm done, and you can rate it before I post it." I didn't think it would be too difficult. Yes, everything I did in college didn't bring high grades, but I didn't expect it then. I was only doing what I had to do to survive those classes. I didn't want to go there at all, but my parents almost blackmailed me. My dad wouldn't let me work in the family business unless I had a bachelor's degree in business management. I'd worked there after school and summers since I was 13 and wanted to work there too when I graduated, but Dad said no. "Not without a degree, no. It's a prerequisite for you to come here to work full-time." So I got over it and went. Got my degree and went to work in the family business. I lowered my gaze to my notepad, picked up a pen, and began to. My name is Josh Barnum. I work as an aircraft mechanic for a major airline and am married to Melinda Barnum. Melinda, I call her Melly, is an office manager at an insurance company. Melly and I have been together for a little over 11 years, 9 of those years married. We met our sophomore year of college, and for me, it was love at first sight. For Melly? Not so much. It took me 3 months to get a date with her. We hit it off. On the 7th date, we made love for the first time. After that, we became a regular couple and usually made love 2 or 3 times a week, at least until the summer between sophomore and junior year. During the summer, I worked for my Uncle Bill, who owned a landscaping company. I worked 10 and 12 hours a day Monday through Saturday. As a result, I was rarely able to see Melly during the week. After 3 weeks of seeing me only on Sundays, Melly started seeing other guys. When I stammered about it, I was told I had to put up with it or forfeit my Sundays. It was a defining moment in our relationship. I've said before that when it came to Melly, it was love at first sight, and I gave in to not losing her altogether. I didn't realize at the time what a mistake that was. It showed her that as far as I was concerned, she could get away with a lot, and I would leave it at that. 3 weeks passed, Friday came, and I only managed to work 6 hours before I was let go due to a severe thunderstorm. I called Melly to see if she would go out with me that night, but she said she already had a date. I hung up without saying another word. I called around the neighborhood to see if anything was going on and found out that Mike Matson was having a party. I called and found out I was invited, so I decided to go. Bad move on my part. I walked in just in time to see Melly hugging and then kissing Dick Moore. They then walked out onto a makeshift dance floor where Melly clung to Matson and they slowly danced to a song. Matson wrapped both hands around her ass and pulled her tightly against him. Melly wrapped her arms around his neck, pulled him to her, and gave him a hot kiss. When the song ended, they seemed reluctant to pull away from each other, but when they finally did, Melly saw me. She said something to Dick and then headed in my direction. I turned, stepped away from her, and left the party. She may have had my phone number, but I'd be damned if I was going to stick around while she made out with someone else. The weather wasn't bad on Saturday, so I ended up working 12 hours. I learned not to waste time calling Melly on Saturday night and making a date for Sunday because she'd be out with someone else. Usually I would call her around 10 o'clock on Sunday and make a date for the afternoon and evening, but that Sunday morning, I didn't call. It's one thing to know that she's seeing someone when I'm unavailable, but it's quite another to know that she's making out with her dates. From what I noticed between her and her companion, they were probably making love too. That gave me a bad idea. According to Melly, she hadn't been with one guy for longer than 4 dates, and after what I'd seen at Matson's, I wondered, had Melly really had sex with all of them? If so, I could be in trouble because we usually made love during our Sunday dates, and I had heard and believed that if you have sex with someone, you have sex with everyone that person has sex with. I thought it would be a good idea to get tested for STDs. Figuring that since Melly hadn't heard from me on Sunday morning, she might call me, I cleared out of the house and was gone all day. When I got home for dinner, Mom told me that Melly had called twice and asked me to call her when I got home. I waited until I finished dinner and called her. She got right down to business. "Why didn't you call me this morning?" "I just figured, given the way you made out with that guy last night, I'd been replaced." "We've already talked about this, Josh. I'm not staying home on the best date days just because you can't make it." I know, and I got over it when I thought it was just platonic dating, but what I saw last night was far, far beyond platonism. I thought we had something special, Melissa, but now I'm not so sure about that. Don't say that, Josh. We do have something special. We need to talk, baby. I don't care what time you work until tomorrow, but when you're free, come see me. Will you do that? I think I can. Promise? Okay. I'll come when I'm free. Monday was a 12-hour day, so I didn't get to Melly's house until a little after 8. Her mom opened the door and said Melly was waiting for me on the patio. When I got outside, Melly was on the phone with her back to the door, and what I heard before she closed the phone didn't bode well for our relationship. I heard the following. "I loved what we did on Friday. I can't wait to see you on Tuesday. I have to go now. He'll be here soon. Bye." I walked back into the house and immediately slammed the patio door shut noisily. She turned and saw me walking out of the house. I didn't give the appearance of overhearing anything. I just walked over to the table and sat down. I just looked at her and waited. Finally, she realized I wasn't going to start a conversation and said, "What's wrong, Josh? You agreed to my dates when you couldn't take time off." At the time, I thought these dates were something like going to a movie and maybe a milkshake at Harry's afterwards. Or a party like Matson's where you dance and socialize with our friends. Simple things. Act like you're still my girl, not what I saw at Matson's. The way you were exchanging saliva with that guy and letting him run his hands all over your body without even trying to stop him told me that if he wasn't sleeping with you yet, he would be soon. Not exactly what I expected from my girlfriend in front of my friends. That's a disgusting thing to say to me. If the shoe fits, maybe you should just leave. That's probably best. After what I've seen, and not knowing if this is how you act with all your dates, I think it might be a good idea to get tested. I stood up and left her there with a shocked expression on my face. I made it to my car before she caught up with me. "You don't think of me that way, do you?" "What I saw Friday night was pretty rough, Melly. I don't want to take any chances." I got in my car and drove off, and she stood there looking after me. I took the test and came up clean, but I never called Melly and let her know. We avoided each other for a little over a week, and then on Thursday, when I was eating lunch in the student dining hall, Melly came over to my table, sat down and said, "You didn't call me on Sunday." "I didn't have to." "You're being unfair, Josh. Why do you expect me to stay home 6 days a week because of your job?" "Maybe because I view it as on-the-job training." "What does that mean?" "Maybe it's training for what you'll have to do after you get married, when your husband has a job where he'll be staying late." "That's just silly. Being married is different than going to school." "Maybe from your point of view, but not from mine. You knew all along that I intended to ask you to marry me after graduation, and you led me to believe you'd say yes. You know that my major is aviation maintenance management, and when I graduate, I will have a license to operate aircraft and propulsion systems. My goal is to work for an airline and advance my career. If I get a job with an airline as a new employee, I will have the worst shift and the worst weekends. If you can't handle my working hours now, how are you going to handle me working shift work, 3 to 11, with Tuesdays and Wednesdays off? That's different. I'll be working too, and we'll do what we have to do to adjust to our circumstances. That's in the future, if we have one. Right now, we have to survive as a couple, and I'm not sure we can do that, given what I now know about your dating. We agreed to talk that night after I got home from work, and eventually she relented and said she would only date on Fridays and Saturdays and would always make sure my friends were present for the dates. That way I could always ask if she was doing anything that wouldn't pass the boyfriend test. It helped that landscaping was a seasonal job that ended in late fall. For our entire junior year and all of senior year, I kept a close eye on her, and only 3 times did she freak out and I pretended not to know. Why? Blame it on love. When we graduated, Melly moved in with me and we lived together while our mothers planned a wedding. It was a new experience for both of us, being able to make love every day and not having to rush home. There were nights when I wasn't at all sure I would be able to get out of bed in the morning. It seemed that the Mellys wanted only one thing, to make love all the time, but of course they couldn't. I did get a job with the airline, and as usual I got the worst shift, 4 to midnight, and my days off were Wednesday and Thursday. Melly got her accounting degree and got a job at an accounting firm where she worked 8 to 5 with Saturday and Sunday off. During tax season, from about the end of January through the 1st of May, she usually worked 10 to 12 hours a day, and sometimes she had to work on Saturday. We were married 5 months after graduation, and our wedding gift from both parents was a down payment on a 4-bedroom ranch in one of the best neighborhoods in town. Neither of us wanted to have kids until we got jobs, so Melly used one of the bedrooms as a home office. The house had a fairly large patio, and one of our first acquisitions after moving in was a hot tub installed on one side of the patio. It was soon filled to capacity. A month after the tub was installed, we threw a party at the house, and after everyone tried out the tub, it seemed like we had guests coming over every weekend. Not that I enjoy the company. I have to leave at 2:45 in order to get to work on time. As we got to know the neighbors, we started getting invited to barbecues and picnics, and of course we had to host a few of our own. We became very good friends with the neighbors on either side of us and those who lived directly across the street. Things were great for the first 2 years, and we were getting used to different schedules. And then things changed. I didn't find out until much later, but it was pretty much the same thing I talked to Melinda about back in college. I was working Friday and Saturday nights, and Melinda was tired of staying home on major date nights. First, it was a night out with the girls after work on Friday. Nights she never told me about. After a couple months, she decided that since she could get away with not letting me know about her date nights, she could safely go out on Saturdays too. She just needed to make sure she was home in bed by the time I got home. She started going on dates with guys she worked with and guys she met at her girls' parties. I don't know when this sex started, so I have no idea how long it went on, but I got a tip from a neighbor who lived across the street. Friday night, he was having drinks with a client after dinner and saw Melinda dancing with some guy and faking kisses. Saturday morning, while Melinda was out shopping, he came in and told me what he had seen. It upset me, but didn't surprise me. He told me that his brother is a police officer who moonlights as a private investigator on his free days, and his brother's days off are Friday and Saturday. He said his brother's rates were 25% less than a full-time private investigator, so I asked him to contact me. All it cost me for him to watch Melinda from Friday when she left work until she got home, and Saturday from the time I left work until she got home, was $600, and it was worth every penny. On Friday, when Melinda got home from work, she went straight to the bar, and no sooner had she sat down on a bar stool than the guy who was buying her drinks came over and danced with her. They left the bar at 8, checked into the Motel 6, and yes, they left the lights on for them, and stayed in room 107 until 11, and then she went home. Saturday, she didn't even leave the house. At 4, her boss from work came by, and although Spencer, the cop, didn't get to film what was going on in the house, he did get some pretty good footage of Melinda doing whatever she wanted to her boss, sitting on the edge of the hot tub and then having sex with him while lying on the chaise lounge cushions. On my first day off, I took what I had to a divorce attorney, and he looked at what I had and suggested I sue her boss for alienation of affection and her company if there was anything in their company policy and procedure manual about the relationship between bosses and those they supervise. I told him that her boss owned the company, and when I told him that, I could almost see dollar signs in his eyes. I told him to get his act together. He told me to give him a week or so and he would get the papers ready for me to come in and sign. I walked out of his office hoping I could act like an ignorant oaf, which I was until I got Spencer's report. I guess I succeeded because Melinda next to me hadn't changed a bit. The lawyer called me a week later and told me he had the papers ready for me to sign. When I got to his office, he was smiling and said he had some very good news for me. Apparently, her boss was bragging to everyone in the office about making love to Melinda. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure the overheard conversation is just a rumor. It's basically a case of he said, she said. Maybe if it wasn't recorded. The person I got the recording from hates Philby and is always looking for ways to mess with him. Isn't there a law that says both parties have to know about the recording? In some states, yes, but this state is not one of them. All right then, proceed as you see fit. I finished the story, reread it, and decided it was fine. Looking at the clock, I saw that it was almost dinner time. I called my wife from the kitchen, handed her the story, and asked her to read it and give me comments. She took the story from me and started reading. About halfway through, she started frowning, and finally she gasped loudly, looked at me, and fainted. I got up, grabbed a glass of water, and splashed it in her face. She hissed as I helped her up. At that moment, the doorbell rang, and I said it was probably for her. She looked at me confused as I led her to the door. When she opened the door, she saw a young blonde-haired girl standing there. The blonde stopped chewing gum to ask, "Mrs. Melinda Barnum?" Melinda answered yes, and the blonde handed her an envelope and said, "You have been served. Enjoy your evening," and turned and walked away. Melinda didn't hear the last word. She fainted again when she found out she had been served. This time I didn't reach for the glass of water. I just grabbed her by the leg and dragged her into the room far enough that I could close the door, and then I went into the kitchen and got myself a beer. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you. My wife's secret dates. I guess not many marriages end with a 7-year-old watching you try to decide what tie to wear. But that's how my marriage to Stell turned into garbage. I met Marion Estella Burns my senior year of college. She wasn't a classmate. She worked as a waitress at an off-campus pizza place that my friends and I went to once every 2 weeks or so. George, Sam, Mike, and I stopped by there on Stell's second day of work. It was pretty corny of me, but when Stell, she let us know right away that she preferred Stell over Stella or Estella, asked us to order. I said, "A large portion of pepperoni, a pitcher of Coors Light, and a date with you." She lowered her eyes into her notebook, writing down the order, and when she was done, she looked at me and said, "My days off are Wednesday and Thursday. Which one do you want? Can't I have both? I guess it would depend on how the first one goes." The first went very well, as did all the subsequent ones, especially after the 8th, when we made love for the first time. Stell was a junior in high school when she had to drop out because her financial support ended when her parents died in a car accident. I learned the whole story on our 5th date. I asked her if their life insurance wasn't enough to help. If they did have insurance, I don't know about it. No one has ever called me about it. I know they had money in the bank, but the bank wouldn't let me have it because my name isn't on the account, so I had no legal rights to it. Didn't you hire a lawyer? I don't have money for a lawyer. Maybe we found each other and fate decided to help you. It just so happens that my Uncle Dan is a lawyer, and I can get a family discount. Not only did Uncle Dan get her bank money, but he found out that her father had a safety deposit box, and when they opened it, they discovered a $100,000 life insurance policy that had a double death benefit clause in case of accidental death, and she was listed as the beneficiary. There was also paperwork there showing that both her mother and father had life insurance as part of the benefits package they worked for. $10,000 on her father and $5,000 on her mother, and both policies paid double accidental death benefits, with her listed as a secondary beneficiary. In 3 weeks, she had gone from a penniless former student to a young lady with over $225,000 in the bank. I asked Stell to marry me when I finished university, and she agreed, but only after she had a degree and a job. When I finished university, I already had a job. It was the company I had interned for the previous 2 summers, so I had pretty much settled in by the time I moved to full-time. The job paid well, and I had some savings, including the $10,000 my parents had given me for graduation, so I had enough for a down payment, and I bought a house. It was a 10-year-old ranch-style house with 4 bedrooms and 2.5 baths, with a big backyard. The backyard had a fairly large patio with a hot tub. When Stell first saw it, she got mad at me for not letting her in on the deal. With the money I have from insurance, we could have made a bigger down payment and maybe even paid for it outright, she said. If we were married, I would, but we're not. But we're going to. But not until you graduate and get a job, and that's at least 1.5 years away, and a lot can happen in that time. What does that mean? You'll meet new people, and you might meet someone you're interested in, and you'll want to see if there's anything out there. When you start working, maybe someone out there will interest you. Like I said, anything can happen in that time. You don't trust me? I doubt it. You won't marry me until you graduate. Although marriage won't affect your ability to study in any way, and you won't even move in with me until then. I've explained all that to you. Yes, and I understand your reasoning, but that alone is enough to make me hesitate. If you want to have a fulfilling college experience, that means meeting new people, trying new things, and anything can happen along the way. It already has. Twice in the last 2 weeks, you've turned me down for a date with me because you were going to do something with the girls you met. It's a given that where girls go, guys also go to try to meet them, and sometimes stuff happens. What can I do to convince you that you're the right man for me? That's something you'll have to figure out on your own. Shortly after this conversation, I asked her what she would like to do this coming Friday and was told that she had already made a date for that evening. But I'm free on Saturday. That won't work. I already have a date for Saturday. Bye. And I hung up. I didn't actually have a date Saturday night, but I felt good about telling her that. What I did have planned for Saturday was a barbecue. I invited all my new neighbors over for a get-acquainted party. The invitation I sent out said, from 2 to however many, and it could go all the way into the evening. Half an hour later, I got a call from Stell. I need to explain everything, I'd interrupted her. I interrupted her by saying, I'm not interested in any explanation. You're free to do whatever you want. But I'm asking you to at least not wear my wedding ring when you date another man. Have fun with it. Bye. And I hung up. She didn't call back. The barbecue went well, it seemed to me. I got to know my neighbors, and they got to know me. They asked me a couple times why a single guy with no kids would want a 4-bedroom house. I explained that I have a fiancé, and we expect to fill the bedrooms with kids when we get married. Then, of course, I was asked why she wasn't at the barbecue, and I explained that she was a college student and had things to do that she couldn't get away from. On Sunday, Stell showed up around noon. About 15 minutes after arriving, she asked how the date went, and I said we ate and talked a lot, and that's all I said. She didn't try to get to the bottom of it, but I realized she wanted more than I gave her. I didn't question her about the date, and I couldn't tell if she was relieved or disappointed that I didn't. The topic was closed. We spent the rest of the day talking about what needed to be done around the house and what we wanted to do. Stell wanted to take advantage of the large backyard and put in a pool. I said we could think about that when we had the money, and she reminded me that when she got married, she would bring a lot of money with her. I didn't say anything back to that. I made no move to make love. I left it up to her, and she made no move to begin. At 8 o'clock, she left for her place, and I didn't see her, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, but I didn't count on it. I remembered all the nights I had to study late or spend time after school in the library studying. I called her on Thursday and asked her what she wanted to do on Friday, and she said she already had a date for Friday. I advised her to have fun and hung up. Stell didn't know it, but all these dates she was going on would come home sooner or later. On Friday, after coming home from work, I went in for a drink with my co-workers, and it was 9 o'clock when I got home. When I arrived, Stell's car was parked in the driveway. When I entered the house, I found Stell in the bedroom hanging clothes in the closet. She turned to look at me and said, "A while ago I asked you what I needed to do to show you that you were just the man I wanted. You replied that I had to figure it out for myself. I decided the best way to show it was to move in with you. So I'm doing that." It was a step in the right direction, it seemed to me. We established a very comfortable routine. There were times when she wouldn't get home in time for dinner because of study groups or group projects, but nothing that I didn't do while still in school. My job sometimes sent me out of town for sleepovers, and twice when I called home at night to let Stell know where I was staying and how to reach me, my calls went to the answering machine at home and to voicemail when I called her cell phone. When I asked her where she was on these occasions, she said she was out drinking with a couple of her girlfriends. This seemed reasonable to me. Why stay home alone when you can spend time with your friends? That's what I did when I was in high school, so why shouldn't she have that opportunity too? Sometimes I wondered if she was seeing other guys, but I had a lot of friends who were single and frequented all the hot spots, and I was sure they would let me know if she was seeing guys. And in terms of her personal life, she spoiled me, 4 or 5 times a week, and usually both days on weekends. Everything was going great until the contraceptive broke, and we had to get married. Stell was 4 months pregnant when she walked across the stage to get her diploma. And no, Bobby wasn't stupid. I did a DNA test, without Stell's knowledge, as soon as Christina came home from the hospital, and she was mine. I know I've said before that I trust Stell, but as one of our former presidents said, trust but verify. Due to complications after Christy was born, Stell would no longer be able to have children. This was to affect our marriage going forward. The marriage lasted the next 5 years, and as soon as Christy went to school, Stell found a job and went to work. I really didn't want her to go to work, but as Stell pointed out, when Christy went to school and there were no younger children in the house for her to take care of, she would go crazy if she had nothing to occupy herself with, so I relented. There were no problems at her job for the first year, but then she was promoted and moved to another department, and shortly after that move, I came along. The girls I work with want me to have drinks with them after work. It'll be on Wednesday, so you'll have to take care of dinner for you and Christy. What bothered me most at the time was that there was no, "you don't mind if I," or even, "you won't mind if." Basically, I was just told that she was going to do it whether I liked it or not. I had enough sense not to make a fuss about it, but I wasn't happy. The first few weeks, she came home at 6:45, then 7:15, then 8:15. It bothered me a bit, and I grumbled about it, which of course led to some coldness in the bedroom for a while, but at the time, I was too busy to dwell on it since I had just been promoted. Fred Bascom had died, and I had been transferred to take his place. Fred had been in charge of several projects, and most of the information on those projects was in his head, not on paper or on his work computer, and died with him. As a result, I had to hastily try to pull the projects together and meet deadlines. The job also involved traveling. Short trips, mostly overnight stays, sometimes 2. By the time this happened, I had done 12 trips. Stell usually left for work an hour or so before me, so I had to get Christy ready for school. I was in the bedroom and Christy was there with me. She was chatting away, talking about all her friends in class. I had a meeting with a new client, and I wanted to dress appropriately for a high executive. I was going through my ties, trying to pick one that would go well with the suit I was wearing, when Christy said, "Mom has the same problem. She thinks about what dress to wear when she goes on a date." That got my attention, and I asked, "When does Mom go on dates?" "When you go out of town." "Does Mom go on dates every time I go out of town?" "Not always, but most of the time." "Do Mommy's boyfriends take her out of here?" "Sometimes." "Does she bring them home with her?" "I don't know, because when she gets home, I'm already in bed." "Who looks after you when Mom goes on dates?" "Angie. Sometimes Katie." Those names belonged to two teenage girls who lived in the neighborhood. I used them both as babysitters when I took Shell to dinner and dances. I would probably never do that again. I wasn't going to confront Shell based on the words of a 7-year-old. Not that I doubted what Chrissy had told me, but I needed hard evidence. After calling several detective agencies, I realized that the cost of a private investigator was beyond my budget, so I would have to do everything myself. After I paid for 2 nights in a hotel and a rental car from Avis for 2 days, though, I thought about that decision. I told Stell I had a 2-day trip to Chicago, packed my bag and carried it to the car as I left for work in the morning. I left work early and parked at the rental place so I could see Stell's car. When she got off work, I followed her home. I parked at the end of the block and waited to see what would happen. About 20 minutes after we arrived, Angie Larson went to the front door and rang the bell. The door opened and she entered the house. 10 minutes later, a car stopped in front of the house. Stell got out, got in, and she drove off, and I followed. The car pulled into the parking lot of the Alhambra Lounge, and when they got out of it, I saw that there was another woman driving. I wasn't prepared for this. As I followed them, I figured Stell was with another guy, and they were probably going to a motel or something. I couldn't go into the waiting room to see what was going on because I didn't have anything for disguise. All I could do was sit and wait for her to come out so I could see what she was doing. That turned out to be a failure. She came out with another woman at 9:30 and went home. I went back to the hotel and tried to make sense of what I had seen. The next day on my lunch break, I went shopping. At a specialty store, I bought a wig and a fake beard. I bought a pair of horn-rimmed sunglasses and knocked out the lenses. In the evening, I was in the area again to follow Stell when she left work. She went home again. Angie showed up. But this time, Stell came out, got in her car, and headed out. I followed her to the Meadows neighborhood. She stopped in front of a house. A woman came out of it, got in her car, and they drove off. It wasn't the same woman Stell had been with the previous night. Once again, they ended up at the Alhambra. I gave them 5 minutes to go inside and get settled, and then I put on my disguise and went inside. I knew the Alhambra and knew that the bar area was dimly lit, unlike the area around the bandstand and dance floor. My disguise was ridiculous, and I was counting on the dimly lit bar to work. If Stell saw me, recognized me, and wanted to know what I was up to, I'd just tell her the truth. I know. If I was willing to do that, why wouldn't I just face her and tell her that I thought she was cheating on me, based on what a 7-year-old told me? It would change our relationship in ways I couldn't even imagine. No proof? Just a comment from a 7-year-old? No, thank you. If there was going to be a confrontation, it would only be if I had hard evidence. I took a seat at the far end of the bar so I could be as far away from the dance floor as possible and still see the dance floor. Stell and the woman she picked up were sitting at a table, actually 2 tables pushed together, with 4 other women. At 6:45, the band came in, everyone was set up, and at 7 they started playing. The men started coming up to the table and asking the ladies to dance, and the ladies sat down and went out on the dance floor. Stell never danced with any one man, and all her dances were clean and spotless. There was no groping, although one guy's hand slowly made its way down to her ass, but she suppressed it. She stepped away from him and left him standing in the middle of the dance floor. Around 10 to 9, the ladies started to gather their purses to leave, so I got up and walked out to my rental car. Stell and her friend came out and got into Stell's car and drove out of the parking lot. I followed as Stell drove the woman home, dropped her off, and walked back to our house. Sitting in my rental car, I called myself a stupid asshole for doubting my wife. She wasn't cheating. It was just a girls' night out. But I was a little curious, so one night I told Stell about what Chrissy had told me. I got curious. You dress up to go out on dates, and sometimes you'll get hit on by someone here at home. Should I be worried? Not really. I take advantage of the fact that you're not here to go out with the girls I work with. What about the guy who picks you up? No one picks me up. It's one of the girls. We have a certain rotation for designated drivers. That explained what I was seeing, but I was back to bad thoughts again. When I mentioned the word dates, Stell's face lost color. Why would that be? My thoughts? Okay. If she doesn't do it while dating, she must do it at other times, and the only time I couldn't consider was her work hours. This led me to long lunch breaks. 2 days later, I was back in the rental car, parked so I could see Stell's car in her company's parking lot. I got there a half hour before her usual lunch break. I knew her usual lunch time because I had driven her to lunch several times. It was a good thing I got there early because instead of noon, she got out at 11:45. She got in her car, drove out of the parking lot, and headed west toward the motels. As I drove after her, I asked myself why she was cheating on me. What had I done, or not done, to cause it? My musings were interrupted when her left turn signal came on. A quick glance to the left showed Best Western. Stell turned left, but instead of turning left into the motel parking lot, she turned right toward the Village Inn, which shared an entrance with the Best Western. I sat in the car and watched the restaurant entrance until Stell got out and then followed her to work. As she entered the building, I cursed myself for being a stupid, suspicious fool. I lingered to see if she left work early, but she got out at her usual time and drove straight home. But I had rented a car for 3 days, so I spent the next 2 days sitting outside her workplace in the rental car, bored to tears. She never left the building on her lunch hour and never left early. I turned in the car and hurried home. When I arrived, Stell was cooking dinner. After eating, I played with Chrissy until she went to sleep, and then Stell and I sat snuggled together on the couch and watched TV until it was time for us to go to bed. When I came out of the bathroom, I found Stell naked on the bed with a smile on her face. I asked myself how I could have doubted this woman. The months flew by, but there is such a thing as human nature, and it affects us all in one way or another. In my case, Chrissy planted a suspicion in my mind, and it didn't go away. It might not have taken root in my mind, but one compartment of my brain stored the way I behaved with Stell before we were married. That and what Chrissy had told me combined and grew. I kept looking for signs that Stell was cheating on me, but I never saw any. The end! Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.